Christian Ludwig. I'm an American entrepreneur and investor. I discovered Kaspa back in October of 2022, which was, if I'm correct, about a year into the project. And I have been an addict ever since, involving myself in the ecosystem, NFTs, tokens, different speeches, talking to developers, jumping in to manage a social media page. I've kind of been everywhere and done everything, so I'm excited to be here and speak to you all today. To start, I want to point something out that's been happening more and more frequently. Yesterday, there was a proof of work network that did 598,000 transactions in one day. There was another proof of work network that did 821,000 transactions in one day. Does anyone know which two networks these were and which one did more transactions? Yes, Kaspa did 821,000 transactions yesterday, and Bitcoin did 598,000 transactions. Now, this is an anomaly on a day-to-day basis. However, this has been happening more and more often. So I want you to hold on to that thought, and we're going to revisit that thought a little bit later. So prior to fiat money, throughout history, people used to barter for things. Before there was a piece of paper that held value, people used to exchange something for something else to get something that they needed. Okay, so an example in this picture, someone is exchanging livestock for medicine. Okay, today when we go to the doctor, we pay with our credit card, right? Or hopefully insurance pays for most of the bill. Well, back in the day, people had to exchange something of value that had some sort of utility to get what they needed from someone else. So in this example, this guy says, hey, I have some chickens, I raise chickens, this is kind of where I store my family's value, and I can give you a few chickens because they're going to produce food for you every single morning in exchange for the medicine I need to help my sick daughter. And then gold and silver became the first type of medium of exchange in addition to livestock, tobacco, anything that people used for something. So gold and silver had a unique attribute that there's a limited amount of supply in the world, and this gave gold and silver a certain amount of value on top of their utility functions. Gold, for example, can be used in computers. It can be used for jewelry. It can be used for heat disbursement in certain hot environments, like a high-performance car engine, for example. And people have always stored value in it for this reason. And then came the gold standard in the United States specifically, where money was backed one-to-one by gold, because gold held its value through certain types of utility. Again, we're going to get back to that. And you guys are probably thinking, oh, I know of a cryptocurrency that calls itself digital gold. What is its utility? Okay, see where we're going? Then came fiat money. One president one day decided we're doing away with backing our money one-to-one with gold, and we're just going to print more and more money, right? And then came cryptocurrency. And the original vision was a medium of exchange, magic internet money, peer-to-peer electronic cash. This was the initial vision. Unfortunately, the first cryptocurrency could not scale to fulfill that vision, and the narrative it has adopted is digital gold due to its failure. And I'm here today to tell you, in my opinion, it is also not digital gold. And I will explain why. I'm not the only person who thinks this. Okay, there are prominent Bitcoin maximalists who have been in the Bitcoin industry for more than a decade, top analysts who are also pointing these things out. And then there are other Bitcoin maxis who choose to totally ignore this like it's not even an issue. They kick the can down the road and they say, this isn't an issue until it actually is, right? When the house is actually on fire, that's when we'll worry about it. So Willy Woo is a top analyst of cryptocurrency, and here he says Bitcoin needs to get to medium of exchange in order to be unruggable. And that is what we're going to explore together today, why he is telling the truth here. Gold was a store of value plus a medium of exchange for 6,000 years. By the 19th century, medium of exchange moved to paper backed by gold. We just discussed that on the prior slide. In the 20th century, store value was centralized and papal convertibility was rugged. By 1971, the entire world had fiat. Jack Dorsey on Bitcoin. It becomes irrelevant if it's only used for store value and it's not used for everyday payments. So Bitcoiners will say, well, Bitcoin is a medium of exchange on the Lightning Network. However, Lightning and Bitcoin are not exactly the same thing. Lightning is a brilliant solution for what it does. However, when you onboard to Lightning, you're not bringing Bitcoin's scale of security and decentralization with you. And most importantly, when you use the Lightning Network for medium of exchange, it does not benefit the miners of the base layer of Bitcoin itself. And that is the critical issue which I'll be discussing today. So to me, Bitcoin is like a golden trophy without a victory. It's the original, it's the most brilliant, it had this immaculate conception, there's a lot of mystery around it. Some people will say it was God-given, and it's the first, it's the bestest, it'll always be the best, and nothing else will ever compare to it. Okay? But what victory has it actually had? What utility in the real world is it being used for on a daily basis, except for like transferring value in big batches? Okay, with people who can afford those transactions. So the question we're asking today is, can Bitcoin become digital gold? And why am I picking on Bitcoin today? Bitcoin is the benchmark, so if I'm going to sell someone on Kaspa, I have to show where there are gaps or trade-offs with other leading cryptocurrencies to show where Kaspa shines, or to show what Kaspa can do that other cryptocurrencies cannot. Okay, the age-old question. Whenever I get into a conversation with someone about Bitcoin or about crypto, or maybe you're trying to talk to someone about cryptocurrency, you've never heard about it, the first thing they ask is, what is it backed by?
Irreversibly storing a transaction, right?
That's a point of value that can be something it is backed by. Michael Saylor would say it's backed by a wall of encrypted energy. And that's fairly accurate because the level of security of your proof of work network kind of is relevant to the value behind the coins you're holding within that network. And I want to get into the flywheel that is a proof of work network, because we're going to get into Kaspa and Bitcoin together here in a minute. But this is basically how the mining incentive works. And as a miner, I know this because I deal with the P&L. I know when things are good, I know when things are not good, I know hash rate, difficulty, all of that. It's a giant economic flywheel. So when someone is interested in mining, they see an economic opportunity to make profit. Very few people are willing to mine just for charity and just for the sake of being kind to the network. Maybe you're willing to do that with a Raspberry Pi. If you're unprofitable, you lose like a penny a month, it's not a big deal. But large-scale ASIC miners who truly secure the network, they're not going to do this for charity. And if at any point in time they're unprofitable, they will shut their machines down. So it starts with an economic opportunity. Miners buy hardware, they spend operational expenditure on electricity, on rent, and they hash blocks to secure the network and process transactions. More miners equals more network security. More network security equals a better store of value, okay? That equals a higher market cap, a higher valuation, which equals more incentive to buy more miners. However, there's one issue with Bitcoin, with Kaspa, with every single proof of work network that is hard capped. There is Doge, but it's not a store value because it's not hard capped, and we'll touch on hard caps here in a minute. Here you have an engine, you have two miners who maintain the engine. In the real world, miners are actually hashing the blocks, but this is as good of an analogy as I can show you guys. You see the two tanks on top? One's orange, one's yellow. The yellow tank is Coinbase rewards, okay? And Coinbase rewards are hard programmed. There's only a certain amount of rewards, and each proof of work network has a certain emission schedule to get those coins out into the world as block rewards for miners. That's how miners make their nut, and that's how they make money, is those Coinbase rewards. Miners can also make money through fees for utility as a value exchange that people are getting by interacting with the network. I want to do this function. I want to buy my Red Bull. I'm willing to pay 1/100th of a penny to do that. So that's my value exchange with the network. The problem is that yellow tank for these proof of work networks it's slowly emptying, right? And one day it will be almost fully empty, and that day is coming quickly for both Bitcoin and Kaspa. I'm talking like 5 or 10 years before things get dicey. And what has to happen is people need to see enough value exchange in that network to use the network enough in order to sustain a fee market over an emissions-based market for the security of the network and the value storage of your digital commodity. So, what makes a proof of work engine everlasting? What's the answer?
You say
Fees. Okay. I know our stage is not this big yet, but I think it will be one day, for the reasons I'm about to discuss. What do you see in the background of this presentation? 21 million what? What does that have to do with anything? That's the hard cap of Bitcoin, right? This is the key narrative that gives Bitcoin its psychological value of being digital gold and being finite, right? But what happens when every 4 years there's less and less emissions and there's more and more miners and the market cap's not going up fast enough? Miners are going to become unprofitable and they're going to shut down. And the easiest solution to this is lifting the hard cap. And this is already being discussed amongst Bitcoin core developers. And there's now a 5% consensus, up from a 0% consensus from core developers, that the supply cap should be taken off. And what would this do? This would kill the entire narrative of digital gold. So let's talk about gold's psychological value versus its practical value. Its psychological value is that only so much can be mined and it's finite. However, gold's practical value is what it can be used as a backup option for medium of exchange. Just like we talked about with the chicken and medicine example, if gold fails to be psychologically perceived as a store of value, it can always be used for other things that are valuable. And that's what actually gives it its value. However, today I'm here to compare Bitcoin to a peacock. It's beautiful. People will stare at it for hours. It's rare, it's special. However, it cannot fly. It can't fly. So on Kaspa's Genesis block in ancient Aramaic is inscribed a Bible verse. Something like, whatever you and your brothers wish to do with your silver and gold, please do so by the will of your God. And I believe this was put there as a reference of Kaspa being complementary to Bitcoin, in the sense of it's a hard cap commodity that was fair launched, that's proof of work. Those are all the qualifications to make something a digital commodity being worth tagged as a digital silver or a digital gold. However, what I think people have failed to realize, and what Jack Dorsey and Willy Woo, who are Bitcoin proponents, are starting to point out, is that utility is a prerequisite for value retention. i.e., you cannot be digital gold without first being digital silver. enter Kaspa. So this is a graveyard of Bitcoin wannabe coins. Has anyone had exposure to these coins at one point in time? Did you ride the elevator up and down? Yep, I sure did. 2017 with Bitcoin Cash, it actually flipped Bitcoin, if you guys know that. That's why you can never count anything crazy happening with Kaspa's market cap in relation to Bitcoins. But these were all solutions to Bitcoin not being peer-to-peer electronic cash. Once people figured out it wasn't scaling a few years into becoming popular. These networks, however, made significant trade-offs in order to be a little bit faster. And they were just slight forks or slight tweaks to Bitcoin, namely just having slightly larger blocks. During this time, there was a young man working with his advisors, working with his students, silently for 10 plus years, putting out research papers on how to scale Bitcoin, starting with the first ever security audit of Bitcoin. These papers were used for Ethereum's consensus model. They were mentioned in Cardano, XRP, many different research papers are used for different consensus mechanisms. And during those 10 years, this gentleman and group of people, they were never selfish enough to just put these academic papers into production themselves. Until that was an idea a few years ago, and Kaspa was put into production off the back of the GhostDAG research paper and protocol. So we all know what is different about Kaspa compared to a linear blockchain. It's able to introduce a whole new dimension and scale in terms of blocks per second, as well as scale in terms of transactions per second. What's unique about Kaspa is it's actually fast enough to be expressive as a proof of work network, similar to how Ethereum was, except it's much more secure pound for pound than Ethereum because there's ASICs involved, and it's more decentralized because it's fair launched and there were no crazy pre-mines like we see with Ethereum. Now, what is unique about Kaspa? What's unique about Kaspa is it's the first coin ever to be pound for pound as secure and decentralized as Bitcoin. And some people can make arguments that it's more secure and more decentralized than Bitcoin. And Ellie and I were touching on a few of those things earlier. But also is able to be expressive and offer a lot of utility. So we go back to what I was talking about with what makes a digital commodity. It has to be a Satoshi system, it has to be fair launched, it has to be proof of work, has to be secure and decentralized just as Bitcoin is. But Kaspa is the first offering that introduces expression and easy value exchange of utility. So this is an example of smart contract execution between Ethereum and Kaspa. As you can see, the smart contract function deploys in half the amount of time, and these speeds will improve as smart contracts are adopted on Kaspa. The crazy thing is on Ethereum, the cost for this smart contract function was $16.96. On Kaspa, it was 1 penny. Okay, and as a businessman, I know that capital and money always flows where there's least resistance. Kind of like a stream or a river. It's just going to go wherever its easiest path of least resistance is. And Kaspa has so much to offer in terms of instantaneous block times, internet speed block times, and cheap fees. So in theory, anyone who, and it has Bitcoin-like security and decentralization. So in theory, anyone who has a brain who sees Kaspa over time will choose to exchange value with the Kaspa network versus any other network. And this brings fees to the network. Fees utility brings value creation and value storage to the network. So let's dive into a little bit about everything that Kaspa offers in terms of exchanging value on the network, choosing to spend my money to get something done on the network. That can include expression, sequencing and verifying of content. It can include decentralized communication, as we're seeing with the Kaspa app. It's the first truly censorship-resistant communication application in the world that's fully decentralized. And a sequencer of value, MOE payments, energy trading, settlement, AI, inference settlement. It's a utility monster, is what Kaspa is. So utility equals use equals fees, which equals an evergreen proof of work network. And if you do not have utility, your proof of work network is either doomed from a security standpoint, or you're going to need to lift the hard cap, and any idea that it's digital gold flies out the window. So let's compare Bitcoin with Kaspa. So on the supply end of things, we'll talk about demand in a minute, but on the supply end of things, Kaspa is more rare in time than Bitcoin is. It has a better stock to flow ratio, meaning that its emissions will tail off quicker than Bitcoin's. I have an interesting exercise for us to go through to demonstrate the issues with the security budget here. This makes a few assumptions. This makes an assumption that Bitcoin's price is $1 million in 2029, that Kaspa's price is $33 in 2029, and both networks are being fully utilized. Okay, those are the assumptions. I know the colors don't show up here too well, but there's a yellow zone, an orange zone, and a red zone. Can you see that near the bottom? Okay, so right now, in the year 2025, both are safe, right? But once you get into the orange zone, and the white lines here are the emission schedules of both. Once you get into the orange zone, and then the red zone, that's when miners start turning off their miners. And the security of the network drops, and the value storage capabilities of the network drop. So, in 2029, each of these assets will require a security budget of 0.78% in order to stay out of the red. Okay, how do we fill the security budget? We have to use that other tank, that orange tank, right? We need fees, okay? But what's it gonna cost when these networks are congested at these market caps that these assets are probably gonna be at in a few years? One transaction on Bitcoin is gonna cost approximately $363. Whereas with Kaspa, because it has much higher throughput and has so many more blocks, i.e. as many blocks in a day as Bitcoin has had in its entire life, it's still going to be less than a penny to transact. To demonstrate this in a different manner, we have two big black boxes here. Each black box represents the entire world population, and the red represents how many transactions can be done on each network in 1 month. Okay? Over here, this is how many transactions can be done in 1 month at $363 per transaction. And on Kaspa, you can essentially have the entire world transact on the network for 1 penny. So this means that there's a lot of value creation in that people are not going to be economically priced out to transact on the network, and the network can handle as many transactions as it takes to maintain the fee network. So what I'm saying in all this in conclusion is Kaspa is everyday money and also the pinnacle of value storage. So when you buy Kaspa and you hold on to Kaspa, you're not speculating in a technology, you're making a bet on superior value storage. You're making a bet in that what you hold is like having chickens back in the day that have something to offer someone else in the future, that you can exchange for anything of value that you can use to protect the financial situation of your family. So what I mean by this is once other people with more money than me and you discover Kaspa, they're going to accumulate a lot of it. Here's an interesting comparison to Kaspa today and Bitcoin the same time period off of the Genesis block. So we are 3.5 years into Kaspa. This was Bitcoin 3.5 years into Bitcoin. 130 petahash compared to 650 petahash. I know that's not an apples to apples comparison, but what I'm saying is Kaspa does have more hash rate today than Bitcoin had just as far in. More daily transactions than Bitcoin had. But look at the market cap, guys. Kaspa had just over $2 billion market cap today, whereas Bitcoin, the same time in with less hash rate, less daily transactions, had a $6 billion market cap. And what have I told you today? Kaspa has the same form factor as Bitcoin, but is superior from a technological standpoint, superior from a value retainment standpoint, and yet Bitcoin, I think, has 1,000 times of a higher market cap. This is what we call in business or investing an asymmetrical opportunity. So what does this mean for my pockets, Christian? So what's super interesting about Kaspa and Bitcoin is they're so similar, but one thing I noticed like 2 years ago when I posted on Twitter, and people laughed at me for this, like you're smoking crack, is I noticed the charts look similar, just on a different time scale. And that's still playing out today. And part of me just wonders if that was meant to be, just because there's so many parallels between the two assets. Kaspa beat Bitcoin in terms of time to a $1 billion market cap. And Bitcoin, prior to Kaspa beating its record, was the fastest growing asset in the world to go from a $0 market cap to a $1 billion market cap. Pepe Coin did beat this record, although briefly coming right above 1 billion and then crashing below. It did not maintain its $1 billion record. Kaspa beat Bitcoin to the $1 billion mark in terms of timeline and has sustained above a $1 billion market cap. This is the first coin to do it faster than Bitcoin's ever done it. So that's an incredible achievement financially. Woo! So my base thesis is that over time, Kaspa will become a superior digital commodity to Bitcoin in due time. And I think that means this trend continues at the very least. I'm not going to sit up here and give my bull case because I don't like to do that. I like to talk conservatively and talk about base cases. The base case, for the reasons I've mentioned in this presentation, is Kaspa will continue to beat Bitcoin to key market caps. So this means getting to $3.7 within the next 4 years, very probably within this bull cycle, and then $37 early next decade. Thank you all for your time.
Hi. How do you see it with the thing that you said? Yeah, when the big boys gonna see Kaspa, they're gonna adapt it for sure. But one of the first big miners of Kaspa was obviously Mara, no? Like the BlackRock Mara, and they dumped the coin. So how do you see the case if Kaspa is not wanted? You know, if they see it not as a possible option, if they see it as a danger, how do you? I mean, we can make paper Bitcoin, paper Kaspas with listing it on Coinbase and doing the same manipulation we did to Bitcoin. How do you see that case, like the worst case scenario?
First of all, Marathon is not a large scale Kaspa miner. They don't.
It was at the beginning, I think, no? Mara before they.
Yeah, but I know like 10 different miners who are larger than Marathon.
I think Allfather started at the beginning, no, and did a very big take. And
also, most miners, they're in business to make immediate profit and they sell their coins immediately. If someone wants to accumulate, they just buy the asset and that's usually a better risk reward over time. And from what I know, I don't think Marathon, they still have a sizable bag, over 20 million, so they didn't sell everything, but they hedged their bets and they showed the market that they could use a superior asset's value to make up for not great profits on a less superior asset. What was the second part to your question?
The second part was like, are you feared of the manipulation and the kind of making paper Kaspa, buying up with that paper Kaspa, and the normal Kaspa and kind of dumping it on the market, or maybe?
Yeah, I think, you know, exchanges, Coinbase, Binance, they launch futures, they could short the price, whatever.
Like the Maxi short roll that is kind
Yeah,
of holding it back pretty.
Yeah, but that, I only think coins of this stature and market cap can only be manipulated for short periods of time by like a factor of 2% max. So it's a factor, but it's really a non-issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Question about, how do you see the difficulty map at the moment for Kaspa? Why it went down drastically? How do you see
Yes, so difficulty drops when miners turn off their miners turn off their miners when they don't see profit in the moment. And that happens when there's a high demand of people buying miners and then price drops. So I actually succumbed to this illusion, and I made a bad decision, and I sold a large amount of Kaspa to buy a large amount of miners when the price was 17 cents to 20 cents. And then what happened is the price went down and more people kept buying miners and the difficulty went up. And I actually think there was an over exuberation of people investing in mining, because Jonathan is an OG. He writes research papers that Ethereum was based off of, and then this guy launches a coin. All the original Bitcoin miners who've been around for 10 to 12 years, they all FOMO into mining. Everyone FOMOs into mining. And basically there's too much hash rate to support a certain market cap, especially when the chart skyrockets past $1 billion from zero and just looks vertical. People are going to take the opportunity to short, they're going to take the opportunity to FUD, and the price needs to take a breather at some point, as it has had a very effective breather and I think is about to start another bull cycle. So yeah, hash rate dips are normal. There were much more severe hash rate dips on Bitcoin, much more severe price dips on Bitcoin, exceeding 50%, which Kaspa has nowhere near exceeded. And it's how the cookie crumbles.
Thank you. So you think Kaspa can sustain, miners can sustain with this low price at the moment, at least for the upcoming 3 years in this cycle?
Yeah, I myself, we have over 350 miners and we're profitable. So there was only 1 or 2 weeks where we were not profitable. So yeah, while it's not raining money from the ceiling, it's still viable to support the network. And I think we'd all agree that Kaspa and altcoins, especially with the macroeconomic situation of tariffs and no rate cuts, altcoins are like suppressed below the floor right now. And they're about to pop. There's about to be a really large repricing of crypto assets that happens once every 4 years. And when we're all back here next year, you're all going to be high-fiving each other, and the thought of like, oh, security budget, whatever, it's not going to be on your mind. But then in the next bear market, all of this that I talked about is going to come into play, and that's where Kaspa is truly going to show its colors, and it's going to fly in a proverbial sense versus Bitcoin.
Thank you, Christian.
Hi, Christian. So I had a question, because we know that thanks to Kaspa's throughput, you can be profitable if you solo mine. But I was wondering if you, as an industrial miner, you apply strategy in your mining, or you just go full mining and you just go with the flow?
Yes, so there are some strategies that we apply that no one knows about, but if I told you about it, then I want to have my advantage.
Okay.
But there are unique strategies that you can deploy if you know where to look. Obviously, finding cheap power is the best strategy, right? So people will put their miners in Ethiopia to mine at 4 cents versus 7 cents. That's one way to extract more value. right? But there are other ways as well.
Any other questions?
Hey, so first of all, I think your presentation was really the shit, really awesome, really high quality. So I saw this chart with the two cubes where Bitcoin has just a little thing filled and Kaspa the whole thing. First I didn't get it, I thought, but yeah, now I get it. So do you think, due to the fact that Kaspa can settle like billions transactions per day, that it could serve as the ether for, and I wrote this down because I thought I'm going to forget it, Kaspa-driven peer-to-peer economy and peer-to-peer finance, and to what point will it, could it, and should it be replacing the way we function together as a big society, maybe thinking into virtual kind of communities, virtual, you know, this kind of stuff. Do you know anything about that? Any aspirations with Kaspa?
Yeah, I think magical things can happen when you mix Satoshi's true product of peer-to-peer electronic cash with the ability to have expression. You're able to have smart contract functionality for anything, and you're able to use the best commodity in the world to transact and use as gas. So for those reasons, it unlocks any type of economy to be ran on Kaspa.
And I'm even going in organizing a society, you know, like further
Sounds
from
interesting.
economy, even organizing us as a
Like a
society.
secret society?
Well, you know, for me it's like not anonymous society, but pseudo-anonymous society. So you open up a wallet today, and if I transact with you and I see your wallet is 10 years old and it didn't have any claims, or like, you know, you hurt someone and they can kind of rate you publicly on your wallet, it's pseudo-anonymous. You can always decide to choose to take a new identity because you want to leave your past in the past, but then you start with zero, right? And that's a way how we can identify and trust each other also in the real world.
You sound like a hacker.
No, I'm not.
All right, thank you guys.